If everyone could take a seat so we could start this afternoon session. My name is Sammy Abernathy. I'm Dean of the Herbert Wertheim College of Engineering at the University of Florida, and it's my pleasure to moderate this afternoon's session on healthcare and engineering. We have three very distinguished speakers. I'll introduce all of the speakers first. Our first speaker will give a keynote address, and then our next two panelists will give shorter panel presentations, and then we'll open it up to the audience for a Q&A session. So let me begin by introducing our speakers. Our first speaker is Dean Kamen. Dean is an inventor, an entrepreneur, and a tireless advocate for science and technology. His roles as inventor and advocate are intertwined. His own passion for technology and its practical uses has driven his personal determination to spread the word about technology's virtues, and by doing so, change the culture of the United States. As an inventor, he holds more than 440 U.S. and foreign patents, many of them for innovative medical devices that have expanded the frontiers of healthcare worldwide. While still a college undergraduate, he invented the first wearable infusion pump, which rapidly gained acceptance. In 1976, he founded his first medical device company, AutoSyringe, Inc., to manufacture and market the pumps. Then, working with leading diabetes researchers, Dean pioneered the design and adoption of the first portable insulin pump. At age 30, he sold AutoSyringe to Baxter Healthcare Corporation. Following the sale of AutoSyringe, he founded DEKA Research and Development Corporation to develop internally generated inventions, as well as to provide research and development for major corporate clients. Dean led DEKA's development of the home choice peritoneal dialysis system for Baxter International, allowing patients to be dialyzed in the privacy and comfort of their home. He led the development of technology to improve slide preparation for the ThinPrep Pap test, and has also developed critical components of the UVAR XTS system, a device marketed by a unit of Johnson & Johnson for treatment of T-cell lymphoma. Other notable developments include the HydroFlex surgical irrigation pump, the Crown stent, the iBot mobility device, and the Segway human transporter. Dean has received many awards for his efforts, including the National Medal of Technology in the year 2000. He was also awarded the Lemelson MIT Prize in 2002 and was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame in May 2005. He is a fellow of the American Institute for Medical and Biological Engineering and has been a member of the National Academy of Engineering since 1997. In addition to DEKA, one of Dean's proudest accomplishments is founding FIRST, for Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology, an organization dedicated to motivating the next generation to understand, use, and enjoy science and technology. Founded in 1989, this year FIRST will serve more than 400,000 young people ages 6 to 18 in more than 86 countries around the globe. Last year, high school-aged participants were eligible to apply for more than $50 million in scholarships from over 200 leading colleges, universities, and corporations. Our second speaker is Dr. Gary Miller. Gary is the founder of Exactech, Inc., and has been Executive Vice President of Research and Development since February 2000. He was Vice President of Research and Development from 1986 until 2000, and was a director from March '89 until November 2007. Gary was Associate Professor of Orthopedic Surgery and Director of Research and Biomechanics at the University of Florida College of Medicine from 1986 until 1996. Gary received his Bachelor of Science from the University of Florida, his Master of Science from MIT, and his PhD in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Florida. Gary has previously held an Adjunct Associate Professorship in the College of Vet Med's Small Animal Surgical Sciences Division, and has served as an Adjunct Associate Professor in the Department of Aerospace Mechanics and Engineering Sciences from 1995 until 2010 at the University of Florida. He currently serves on the Dean's Advisory Board in the Herbert Wertheim College of Engineering at the University of Florida, and also serves on the college's external advisory boards for the J. Creighton Pruitt Department of Biomedical Engineering and for the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering, where he is also appointed as a courtesy professor. Gary was a consultant at the United States Food and Drug Administration from 1989 to 1992, and has served as a consultant to such companies as Johnson & Johnson Orthopedics, Dow Corning Wright, and Orthogenesis. And our final speaker is Karen Zaderej. Karen currently serves as President, Chief Executive Officer, and a member of the Board of Directors of AxoGen, Inc. Prior to her current roles, she served as Chief Operating Officer from 2007 to 2010, and as Vice President of Marketing and Sales from 2006 to 2007. From 2004 to 2006, she worked for Zaderej Medical Consulting, a consulting firm she founded, which helped medical device companies build and execute successful commercialization plans. From 1987 to 2004, Karen worked at Ethicon, Inc., a Johnson & Johnson company, where she held senior positions in marketing, business development, research and development, and manufacturing. Karen is also a director of Southeast Bio, a nonprofit supporting the life science industry in the southeastern United States. Karen has an MBA from the Kellogg Graduate School of Business and a Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering from Purdue University. Please welcome all of our panelists to the stage, and we'll begin with Dean Kamen. Dean?
Thank you. So first of all, thank you. You gave all the great statistics. I have nothing else to say. I will start by saying I'm playing this game under protest. I have 29 minutes and 48 seconds, and ADD is my strongest personal characteristic. I have 4 completely independent areas that I would like to discuss. Maybe not discuss. I would like to grovel and beg for the support of the universities of the country and the world. And they're really separate and distinct, and you heard about a few of them. We spoke on the phone a few days ago, and I said, well, if I do just a little on the engineering as it relates, I think, to classical engineering, but then can I grovel and beg? The answer was yes. So I'm going to very quickly just review, maybe to get some credibility, what I've done in the world of engineering, but truth be told, I'm not an engineer. I studied mostly math and physics. I spent the best 5 years of my life as a freshman at WPI. I was an early guy in makerspace. I got there and realized they had all these brilliant buildings, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, all the different engineering buildings, and the physics and math building. And my older brother at the time was a brilliant, very good academic student, unlike myself, and he's an MD, PhD candidate, later ended up on the faculty at Yale Medical School, then went out to Texas. But he's a pediatric oncologist. He needed a better way to deliver drugs to babies as he was developing new therapies. So I would go into the prototype shop in the physics department and let them teach me how to make things, and then I'd go to the electrical engineering building and ask them for help. And I created my little curriculum. I had a faculty of consultants. I got a lot of work done, started a company, but going to class always interfered with my education. So I didn't do much of that. I left. But finally, I got an honorary PhD as their commencement speaker a number of years later. And I'm a huge, huge advocate of education, but I've always been hugely frustrated that engineering education in general is almost bragging rights. When I don't think they do it anymore, but I'm sure you all know. They look at the student to the left and the right at incoming. One of you is not going to be here next year. And I thought, wow, what a tragic way to run a bad institution. But I think engineering has been elitist. It's made to certainly not appeal to young girls and minorities. I think that's an unintended consequence. But I love the power of technology and the elegance of mathematics, physics, and think if it's properly presented, the world would be way better off if more people understood, for instance, rational thinking. In any event, I put this up only to say I really did make stuff for a number of years. We were the only supplier in the world of wearable insulin pumps, which I did develop while I was supposed to be taking other courses. We later, for the same reason, started developing sophisticated devices like this. We were told we were nuts. Patients can't do life support at home alone in their bedroom. We took this massive equipment like this and turned it into a simple bedside device with a green button that says go and a red octagon that says stop, and everything else happens internal to the machine. It self-purges, it self-primes, it has all the safety systems so a patient can do it. We got it through the FDA in a couple of years. This was back in the early 90s. And I'm happy to say that we've shipped well over 600 million therapy cassettes for this thing, and it's become a standard of care. And like a lot of things that technology does, it starts out with the wisdom of the general public and the regulators being indefensible. And when it works, it becomes indispensable. And this is where we are. We're up to our next generation of that, but I don't have time to talk about DEKA stuff. Yes, the 4 things I need from you is I now have about 500 engineers, and my growth is normally organic. I find the best of all the schools and bring them in, but I'm suddenly desperately looking for about 100 engineers. electrical, mechanical systems, controls, metallurgy, computational fluid dynamics would be nice, maybe material science, and I'm sure all of you guys and women are here to help me. The reason I'm going to show this one, that's an early project we did for DARPA, is really another one of my pet peeves. We claim that we do biomedical engineering as a topic. I think most of the interesting things in product development happen at the interface between well-established fields and other well-established fields, but finally the idea that if you put them together you get something bigger than the parts. And I used to joke with my brother all the time in that regard. We should write a book, you know, biomedical engineering, and you'd write the first 10 chapters, all the Latin words that doctors use, and pictures of funny organs and blood and guts. And then I'll write the last 10 chapters, elegant physics, a little bit of math. That's not biophysics or biomedical. That's two different people talking across each other. And I've been desperately trying to get the engineering community, particularly the universities, to really focus on bringing the engineering disciplines to the field of biology, which is really different than the approach most people have taken. Anyway, we were asked, the other peeve I have is research and development. They don't talk to each other. Research is a euphemism for, it's a long way off, leave me alone, I'm going to go in my lab and play with this miracle in a roller bottle. And development is, I want the product in the next 90 days or we're cutting off your funds and we're moving somewhere else. And engineers normally work in the world of developing something and make incremental improvements. The research side is more curiosity-based, long-term, and not as disciplined. That's fine, the world needs both of them. But as an example of how they don't work well together, we were asked by DARPA to improve 150-year-old technology, literally prosthetic devices, which were a wooden stick with a hook on it, which is what the US military gave to all the soldiers at the end of the Civil War. Now kids come back, and they're mostly kids from Iraq or Afghanistan. Due to IEDs, they're missing an arm or two. And we don't give them a wooden stick with a hook on it. We give them a plastic stick with a hook on it. And they came to me pretty clearly disappointed by that and said, build us an arm that's like no other, that can allow a person to have dexterity, efferent, afferent, haptic response. You know. Wow. And I said, sure. And then this is DARPA, right? They want to go beyond any reasonable incremental stuff. They're willing to fail. You got to love the folks at DARPA. But they said, besides giving us a 14 degree of freedom arm, I mean, literally, the only spec they gave me was this colonel, who happens to also be a neurosurgeon, says, in a year, Dean, I'm going to bring one of these soldiers up here. I'm going to put him at this conference table in your place, and I'm going to tell him to pick up that raisin and eat it. So he's going to have fine motor control, rotation at the wrist, the elbow, shoulder, abduct and flex, which none of these prosthetic devices do. And then, Dean, I'm going to give him a grape. And he better not crush it and do the same. Oh, now he wants efferent, afferent, haptic response, pressure sensor. He says, and it all better fit on a 50th percentile female frame and be self-contained and powered. I told him he was nuts. The technology's not there yet. We agreed to disagree. He then said, by the way, I want it neurally controlled. This is where R&D don't see. I said, look, Doc, I will actually agree in a year to give you a 9-pound device, which is the weight of a 50th percentile female arm. I'll give you one. But listen, you're not going to control it. Oh, yeah, it's minor surgery, Dean. Now, that's what a good neurosurgeon will tell. I think minor surgery is anything they're doing to somebody else. You know, if you're at this end of the knife. But I said, Doc, you're going to open up somebody's skull, put a deep brain probe, get past the motor cortex, hope you don't hit the optic nerve and leave them blind, hope it stays patent, hope it doesn't get infected, hope you can get a signal, hope you can decode the signal. No, these kids have suffered enough. I'll take the gyros and accelerometers that are linear, proportional. I get 3 degrees of freedom. I get pitch, yaw, and roll. I can put them in a little device the size of a cube of sugar, put a Bluetooth radio on them, and they'll use them the way you learn to use a mouse, intuitively. Because your definition of developing this thing at that intersection of what's doable in the engineering and what might hopefully soon be doable in the world of medicine are very different. So we agreed to disagree. I said, I'll just make a standard input for this thing, and if you really do get neurology guys that can give us those signals, we'll drive it from there. About a year later, we had this guy who's missing both of his arms, doing all of this work, by the way, with just those sugar cubes, a couple of them in his shoes. It took him less than 10 hours to where he could do it. You'll see him do next with another guy who lost an arm. They have fine motor control. In a minute, this guy, Chuck here, is going to pick up a spoon and start eating cereal out of a bowl without dropping any milk. I can't do that. His wife, at the time he's doing this, is standing behind me. Remember, he has no arms and no shoulders. His wife is standing behind me at this point. Here he goes, and she's crying. And she says, Dean, he hasn't fed himself like this in 19 years, so you got a choice. We keep that arm or you keep Chuck. So now he picks up the grapes. He doesn't break any. He has a haptic response, and you think life is good. I think you'll hear more about the FDA from the next speaker, but that was our Model T. This is our next generation. We've got a bunch of them on vets now. The scary thing is, even though it had no neural direct interface to the body, you slip it on and off like a glove, it took us 18 months to get approval. It went into de novo after they rejected it at Class 1 and Class 2. We don't have enough time for that discussion, but trust me, the world needs way more smart people that understand technology and all that's good and all that's bad and all that needs to be put in the balance. I'm going to show you another project also for a slightly different reason. This is the first version of our stand-up balancing, at the time certainly the world's most sophisticated autonomous robot that could carry a disabled human up and down a flight of stairs. Something goes wrong in there, you don't get a chance to reboot. I took it into the White House, and if anybody's interested, the White House is not ADA compliant. You can't get into the Oval Office unless you go across the grass in the Rose Garden or down a couple of steps from the Roosevelt Room. Not a problem. And of course, I'm explaining to the president that he's got to bring the first kids, that's what that literature is, to the White House for the same recognition that we give athletes and entertainers. And pretty much every year of his presidency and the 3 presidents that followed him, that's happened. We'll see what happens next. But the reason I show you that is, again, due to FDA and other reasons, it couldn't get to volume, even though our partner at the time was the largest medical products company in the world, J&J. But to show you where engineering is blurring all the lines to make the world more exciting, who should put this thing out there? Well, there's a little company that we went to recently after demonstrating with 10 million hours of operation that not a single machine ever went down. Fleet of hundreds of these. A little company, bigger than GM, bigger than Ford, bigger than Mercedes, a little company called Toyota came to see us about fly-by-wire technology, sensors, accelerometers, and asked if they could license some of our technology. And I said, no, we don't license it because we need it. We want to build the next generation, but if I got a deal for you, they didn't want to be in the medical products business, and the quantity of cars they sell, this thing is not of any interest. But I said, look, you want to give flexibility, access, independence, mobility to everybody. That's fine. Why don't we agree that we'll help you develop the next generation of sensor technology for the automotive industry. In return, you help us make these things available, sort of like an orphan drug. They were so enthusiastic to do that, we reached an agreement. We're doing this. But to give you a sense of it, here's a giant automotive company who has basically said they're not afraid of their competitors in the automotive industry. The reason they came to us was what they're afraid of is in 5 or 10 years, the competition will be, is it Google? Is it Amazon? Who's ever got the best LiDAR, the best artificial intelligence, the best sensor suite. And they're basically saying cars are 4 wheels with an engine on. That stuff is so well developed, nobody opens the hood anymore when you buy a car. We all expect it's all going to work all the time. We're the cup holders. These guys figured out that the car is going to become nothing but a platform for sophisticated computers, controls, and sensors, and that's what they're looking for. So if you now have engineering schools that say, well, we're big in automotive, understand automotive wants to do more in artificial intelligence, sensors, and robotics than they do in motors, gears, transmissions, et cetera. So you ought to take that into consideration. We did announce that we'll relaunch this thing this year with them. The other reason I'm really here groveling and begging is, and maybe it's because of the ARM project we did with DARPA and a few other of those projects, the Department of Defense announced last year that they wanted to create a place where regenerative medicine would be taken from the world of science and technology research, the R side, into real development to bring it to scale. By the way, when you say that to most great researchers that have got these miracles in their roller bottles, maybe it's some of your faculty or you, sometimes they don't like being told that they're not good at engineering, manufacturing, development, selling, even though they never do any of it. But they're very resistive to having us add those disciplines, which is why I think some of them have had miracles in roller bottles for 20 years and they can make one a week or one. And the world of regenerative medicine hasn't come to scale because it would be like Shockley and, sitting at Bell Labs saying, I've made a transistor and it works. But let's never have companies like Applied Materials or Texas Instruments figure out how to put 3 billion of those things on something so cheap that you can essentially give them away like Fitbits. Anyway, after first protesting to the DOD that they went to the wrong guy, I don't know much about regenerative medicine, they said, that's why we want you to bid on this. We'd really like you to coordinate all the people that have all these incredible 21st century capabilities in their labs at their universities and help them with some common tool sets and help them with the regulatory process to take everything they're doing and turn it into something of scale like the semiconductor industry that can make it available to everybody, like starting with cells, make tumoroids for the development cycle for the big pharma, like simple tissue, skin and bone, like complex tissues, subsets of organs, like whole organs. When are you going to start printing complete lungs and livers and kidneys? And so we said that we would try to collect some great medical institutions. We collected 26 of them, and some companies to help us. We collected 41 of them, and between the government funding and the support we're getting from industry, we raised commitments of about $300 million, set up this, since it was for the DOD, we called it ARMY, and no, it's not a misprint, it's Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing, not regenerative medicine. We're going to count on all your incredible geniuses for the medicine. We just want to get it to scale, and I need some help from all of you to do that. So as an example, so DEKA moved up to New Hampshire. That's one of the sets of building. This was, over the last 20 years, First is now the headquarters. Autodesk is a major partner in Army, so is TI, so is United Therapeutics. We just moved a major piece of the University of New Hampshire into that building in our 160-year-old mill yard. Then we moved our manufacturing for things like the prosthetics, and we have just put Army in here. But we are, as I said, looking to partner with all the great medical schools, universities, research centers to make this thing go. As an example, we've already taken some of our core technology, like those disposables we showed you for those dialysis machines, and in a matter of a few months, took stuff that is being essentially taking porcine organs and regrowing them. Here, Greg Sawyer is sitting in the room somewhere from University of Florida, and he's been able to build his own little printer and using carbopol and as a liquid-like solid demonstrated that he could print all sorts of things. That doesn't look particularly useful as a medical structure, but here's another one of the things you could print out of, for instance, collagen in a liquid-like solid. He's been kind enough to give us these slides to use as we went forward. But now, how do you take this structure, for instance, with a lot of fine detail, and maybe take induced pluripotent stem cells, get them into it? They're smart enough. Nature's pretty cool to decide, oh, I'm supposed to become the vascular system to a heart or a liver or a lung or an eyeball, and there you go. As an example of what we think Army can do, as we showed this to a lot of these people that generally seemed resistant, these researchers, to having engineers come help, we said, well, instead of sending stuff to a 2D printer, what if you had on your desk a 3D printer? And what if you could put sensor technology in it to see what's going on, MRI technology, chemical sensing technology. What if you could put different kinds of print heads to simultaneously print multiple kinds of cells into any kind of media? All of a sudden, they liked the idea. So we went out in a matter of, again, a couple of months. We at DEKA built some really high-performance specialty 3D printers that, since we'll build many of them now, we're going to give them to the 26 groups that are doing 21st century development in roller bottles. And it really is 21st century. But when you look at how they do it, it's like they took over Madame Curie's lab, or they borrowed some tools from, you know, the Flintstones hardware store. And you wonder how they got so far, because the engineering community, I think, is not really giving them the tools they need. Anyway, we're now exactly halfway through, and I get to talk about FIRST. Well, I should say, these are the 26 major universities. You'll see a lot of commonality here. You saw Vince this morning. These are the ones that have signed up to be partners in Army, but we're always looking for more. Now we'll talk about FIRST. We did start that 26 years ago with 23 teams in a high school gym in Manchester, New Hampshire, and it's grown 55% compound annual growth for 26 years. Take out your calculator, 1.55 to the 26th. If we had 23 teams in year 1 and 40 teams in year 2 and 80 teams in year 3 and 200, well, how many teams would we have in 2017? You got it. There are slightly over 55,000 schools this year from 86 countries, 140,000 volunteer mentors, many university-based, 3,700 corporate sponsors, and as you heard, $50 million in scholarships from the universities, giving to particularly women and minorities that have been awakened to science and tech. So I'm going to show you now a little piece, because I got 8 minutes, little piece of a very, it was already a short video describing what FIRST is, narrated by the voice of God, Morgan Freeman.
This is the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl of smarts, that is. It's a life-changing competition. It's kids having fun, competing, working together to dream up, design, and build robots.
It's just an exhilarating feeling. It's like I'm using power tools.
They're having the hardest fun they'll ever have. And they're becoming our next generation of engineers and innovators. First, come out! For inspiration and recognition of science and technology. My teachers were some of the greatest influences on my life by challenging and trusting me. These mentors got me to understand that I could do anything I put my mind to.
I feel like I can go and do anything I want to do because of this program.
Someone took the time to guide and inspire me. It changed my life. Take some time. Go to usfirst.org.
So that's what FIRST is in a very, very short nutshell, but now I only have 7 minutes. So I'm going to end in 4 minutes with a much more difficult question to answer than what something is. That's a description of facts. It's for programming. I'm going to give you a voice of somebody that's not Morgan Freeman telling you why FIRST is, because I'm hoping the why will make sense to technical people, university people that are specifically, I hope, creating the generation of kids that for the first time in the history of the world will be the leaders. If we don't get technically competent people with the power that technology is developing in every field, including cyber and regenerative medicine, the world will continue, I think, to unwind itself. So I'm not going to go over the numbers anymore because we don't have time, but at least you think that I'm drinking my own Kool-Aid. These are independent studies done by universities, paid for by a major foundation that prove that FIRST has this huge impact. And yes, you'll see a lot of the same schools help my FIRST program. But here's what I really need from you. It's a new program we're announcing. And by the way, I wish I had time to talk about it, but I was lucky enough that when the National Academies of Engineers the Royal Society of Engineers and the Chinese Academy of Engineers decided 6 years ago to all work together on coming up with what is now known as the 14 Grand Challenges. I was one of the US people on the NAE committee. I went to London 2 years later to announce that and work with them. I later, 2 years ago, went to the second meeting outside the US in Beijing and announced from a podium at the Chinese Academy that at the same time we have the final meeting 2 years later, which is this July, that all these engineers will be there, so will FIRST with its new international program. And the three major academies agreed in an unprecedented way, from the presidents on down, to host this and lend us their prestige. But they mostly get that prestige from the universities. So this is where I need you. The then young guy at about 80, Shimon Peres, started putting FIRST teams all over Israel after we had been around maybe 10 years, which was 15, 16 years ago. He calls me up and says, Dean, this program is transforming not just our country, but the Middle East. I can't afford to send all these teams to US regionals. You got to put a regional here. We did. He started inviting teams from around the Middle East, and in one of his opening sessions, where he's the master of ceremony there, he made the most powerful statements I think I've ever heard from a political leader. He said, I think we should stop teaching history all over the world. I used to think we teach history because kids will learn from the mistakes of their parents and grandparents. Kids would learn that nobody ever wins a war. Some people are destroyed and defeated, the others are. And he said, but politics is about dividing the world with arbitrary lines on a map, arbitrary languages, customs. He said, Dean, let's stop teaching history. All we've learned is that each group teaches their kids their own history, their own culture, their own truths. They learn how to duplicate the craziness of the self-inflicted wounds of their parents, generation after generation. Let's stop doing that. Let's teach all kids science, technology, engineering, and math. Mathematics is the same in every language. The laws of physics are the same everywhere. And if kids all over can learn how to solve their own problems, if they can use technology to build their own gardens, they won't need ours. And besides, once they learn how to communicate and cooperate, they'll have a common understanding, they'll trust each other, and maybe the world will be a better place. Based on that, I decided FIRST isn't just good enough to fix the culture of America, it should be a tool of international diplomacy. So these are quotes that he gave me as I left there. I wish I had time, but I got to get to this video. This is, as I said, we announced in Beijing that we would, concurrently with the big event on July 17th, when they're all here in Washington, we will have our event. This is what we now look like. This is the newest piece of FIRST. FIRST Global, to go along with FIRST Lego League, FIRST Tech Challenge, FIRST Robotics. We already have 153 countries signed up to be there. They come from all over, including refugee camps. This is the 153. If they're green, they said they're going to be there. We made a custom kit for them that's simpler, easier to ship. I got FedEx to agree pro bono to get them everywhere in the world. This is where all of you come in. Unless these kids can be affiliated with a known, trusted university in these countries that can help them with their visas to come to our Olympic event in Washington, D.C., there's no chance they're going to get here. All of you universities I know are associated with universities around the world, so if you could just help this event, it will be astounding. It will be, as I said, walking distance from the White House, walking distance from where the three academies are going to get together. And as I think you can see, it's in a pretty prestigious place. This is the inside of that place. We're going to set it up with custom-made fields. One of the grand challenges is access to water. The theme for this robotics game is water. Anybody that's ever seen FIRST will know that they're pretty exciting events. We made a custom kit, which I've now shipped hundreds of them. They're completely self-contained, like FIRST Lego League, but they have super sophisticated stuff. Snapdragon stuff, this stuff, Qualcomm is a major supplier, NI is a major supplier. We have phenomenal high-tech stuff in these kits. It's causing all these kids all over the world to love this thing. We produced massive quantities of stuff to get the cost way down, and now you could say, well, why should you help? I'm asking you not just as leaders in industry, in education, professors, How about as citizens of the world, as human beings, how about as parents, if you see a world that is irrational, it's nice to say, well, I'm just an engineer, I don't worry about that. You heard one of the speakers a while ago say the most enlightening thing kids found was the technology is only a small piece. It is true, that's what they found. And as engineers, we say, well, the answer to that is that's inappropriate. You know, you don't let the nuts run the asylum. And we as a group should have a much louder voice, not just in what technology we develop, but why we develop, how we develop, and how it gets put out there. So I went to a guy and said, I need a quick 2-minute video that can explain why FIRST is important to the world as the right kind of tool. And it's not about the robots. And I kept saying to him, it's not about the robots. And he's a fantastic producer, Hollywood. He's worked with us in other ways. And he said, Dean, you want me to give you in 2 minutes what FIRST is, but I read in my notes here, you said it's about self-respect. He said, mostly it's not about robots. I said, yeah, that's. He said, well, how much of the 2 minutes do I use to tell people what it's not? And then what's left for me to try to get your big idea across? I said, well, that's your problem. You're a good guy with media. I said, well, I'll get you. I was afraid he'd say no, so I said, well, I'll get you Morgan Freeman. He says, Dean, I don't need Morgan Freeman for this. I need a 7-year-old girl. So this is what he gave me.
This isn't a robot. It very well may have hydraulic arms, a drivetrain, and a circuit board, but this isn't a robot. This is a lesson in humility, hard work, and collaboration. This is a CrossFit workout for the muscle upstairs. This is an apple for the next generation of Newtons. It's a lot of things, but this isn't a robot. This is a roadmap that leads straight to engineering. This is a rock to shatter 1,000 glass ceilings, a rope to pull a generation up and out of poverty, a sledgehammer to break down cultural barriers, and a universal language spoken in every nation on Earth. And because of that, this is a compass that can help point the way to peace. But please, don't think this is just a robot. This is Glastonbury for technology. This is mission control for the next moonshot. This is the Rosetta Stone to help translate the future. This is the sport that will help us win tomorrow. This is the software to program ourselves to cure cancer, build a clean engine, or step foot on Mars. But this isn't a robot. It's a machine to build the people who will change the world.
Sadly, my time is up, but I need your help on all of this stuff. The world needs your help on all of this stuff. Thanks.
Thank you, Dean.
That was great.
Gary?
This is some act to follow. Let's see if I can open this up.
That one's mine.
That's yours?
Yeah, he's probably.
Do I?
I think they're going to flip them for you.
Are they going to? So, Cammy, thank you very much for inviting me here, and thanks to the organizing committee for allowing me to share a few words with you tonight. I thought long and hard about the assignment I got from the dean, and felt that if I could contextualize some of what's going on as we see it in industry, and I work in the medical device industry, it would help us try to come together in ways similar to what Dean Kamen just talked to us about, so that we can advance technology for the good of humankind. The company that I founded years ago and that's still in business today really set its sights on innovation and differentiation. It's the way we felt we could compete And with the backdrop of this new thing called 3D printing or additive manufacturing, I thought I could contextualize it, and you folks would be able to draw from that information to better the academics that we have available to us. So it's a relatively young industry, and I'm going to whip through some of these slides. I understand that the whole presentation is available to you, but I want to try to keep us on time. What we have here, when we think about it, is really medical devices have been around for about 100 years as we know it, which is a very young industry. I make the joke to students when I lecture that the Journal of Biomechanics, the first issue was 1965. So it's a fledgling industry in that regard. And I'd like to talk a little bit about joint replacement as an example of what we're trying to do. So let me contextualize it. This is the first step. If we look back before the 80s, we get into the 1950s, where implants were made by hand, if you will. On your left, you can see it there. Stainless steel was the material of choice. And over about a 20-year period, we have engineers starting to work with physicians to bring about what's called the low-friction arthroplasty, or this hip that you see that was developed by a surgeon, John Charnley, in the 1950s and 60s. In 30 short years, we found ourselves putting implants together that had metal coatings to interface with the bone. Rather than the bone cement that you see in the upper right, it's an acrylic cement like you get when you go to the dentist's office, for example. And we see a very quick evolution of porous materials. And what I'd like to share with you about this additive manufacturing we have available, Greg Sawyer's making soft stuff, little stuff. We're making the heavy metal, if you will. So it was a limited arsenal at the time. We used small beads, stacked them up as you can see in that scanning electron microscope picture, put it on the surface of an implant, heated the implant up, which destroyed its real fatigue properties, tried to find ways of fixing this porous surface to an implant. We partnered with industries around the world as far as materials were concerned, but one of our biggest partners in this journey was academia. And what I've tried to do in the rest of my slides, you'll see the magnifying glass there in yellow. All the work that's on that slide was done in tandem with a university or research institute. So I can probably give you some feeling for how interactive this was. Most of the optimization of these kinds of surfaces to get bone ingrowth to happen occurred with our university colleagues. I had the wonderful opportunity to be on the academic side during this time rather than on the industrial side at the time. And here you can see an explant of one of those implants with the bone fully adhered to the prosthesis. This allows us to get great fixation and eliminate one of the materials, this acrylic cement, that tends to degrade over time. So we have biological fixation. On the left of this slide, you can see some of the work that was done out in Salt Lake, and you don't have to worry. I wanted to give you a sense. You can see on the leftmost pane, bone growing right into that porous surface, but the right pane in that group, there's very little bone. This is years of work to show which alloys were friendliest to bone, and you can see the one on the left it's titanium alloy, which seems to be much more friendly to this bioadhesion compared to cobalt chrome. We've learned now that it's just a slower process with cobalt chrome. Over those same 6 or 7 decades, we've seen as engineers manufacturing equipment go from a traditional mill, hand-operated, to computer-controlled machines that allow us to make multiple devices very quickly. And in the bottom right there is, in fact, a 3D metal printing machine just being installed in one of our offices. So where do we go from here? We just talked about additive manufacturing a bit. Dean did and teed this up beautifully for me. There's numerous materials we have available, metals and plastics. Tissue scaffolds, something we saw. This is like I feel like we're on the verge here of being a kid in a candy store as a bioengineer, and that's my point. This is a new technology and it's moving at breakneck speed. We also, my civil engineering colleagues handed me a couple of these. They're actually 3D printing houses now with concrete. They're 3D printing food. I think I may have had some of that on the airplane last night. And in fact, we're now into the medical devices area where we have been able, just 5-6 years ago, to print a 3D model in plastic, all the moving parts, all at one time, to share with a surgeon to get their feedback in improving what's going on in the operating theater. On the right pane here is a very complex part that would have taken weeks to make, and it was 3D printed in about 8 hours. And we made many of them. So I'm calling this a disruptive technology. I had the luxury as a researcher at university to work through this first phase when we were trying to get porous materials, and now somebody just gave us a whole new toy box to play in. It's been about 5 or 6 years that people have been using these technologies, and you can see some of the intricate parts that we're able to make. The question is, should this be custom and prototype implants, or can we go into production? We've taken the leap of faith. On the left side is a custom implant made from a CT scan of a patient who had cancer in their pelvis. And we're able to create a one-off for that individual. But now we've moved into production. And you can make 100 hip cups all at the same time using this technology. It's a little bit more intricate than it looks like because you have to support it all as you are creating this 3D printed object. But you can see there are some places in the world where 1 in 30 of the implants that are currently being implanted are 3D printed. Our company had a wonderful fortune, and we were talking about regulatory, Dean, and this one's a hard one for me to do. It took us 4 years to get the hip that you see in the upper right to the market, but we were very proud to be the first company that received FDA clearance for a 3D printed orthopedic implant. And the challenge was not the technology, but understanding the performance characteristics that the FDA wanted us to meet. And it turns out that things are moving more quickly than the regulatory environment can accommodate. So this is an opportunity that I would share with all of you because industry and the university can really benefit by working together. In this last year, we've developed new 3D printed objects that allow us to replace bone that's lost during a revision surgery, and there are almost as many revision surgeries being carried out now as there are primary surgeries. So we moved from sintered beads to this variable porous structure, as I'll call it. And it's contiguous to a solid substrate. So you may not be able to pick it up, but if you look on the left panel, you'll see that the pore structure is, quote, growing right out of the solid structure. In times past, we had to use sintering or some other method to do that. And again, it's like a kid in a candy store. We can now engineer the structures we want, and the surface can have different morphology than the middle of it, all the way through to the base of it, so it's stronger, and it carries with it tremendous biopotential. I said it once, and I'll probably say it more than a few times, that this is a disruptive technology, and we need to learn how to harness it. I had an engineer say this to me that's working on one of our projects, that, well, complexity is free now. There isn't a penalty for that at all, which there used to be. And now we move from design for manufacturing, with some of the older machines I'm talking about, to designing for function and then building it. And it's like, I get very excited about it, it's like night and day. So not only can we look at the overall structure, but the macro texture, the micro texture, even down to the nano, we have the ability to change what we're making, but we have to understand now how biology is going to interact with that. There's a lot of work that gets carried out in these days, a lot of validation work, animal studies. The FDA is very rigorous about wanting to know how these materials are going to behave, And in fact, they lean on us to give them data so that they can give it back to us. And we have to raise the bar each time we give them more information. And I see heads bobbing here. So I won't dwell on it. The fact of the matter is, for those of you that have veterinary divisions and things like that, this is a place where real progress can be made in understanding the interaction of implants. Again, you remember that first series of pictures I showed you of porous ingrowth. Look at the space on the right, and you can see that the bone is fully integrated with the surface because the surface has been modified to have a structure that's friendly to bone. These are a big deal. We can start carrying significant weight on implants such as this. So we're at a time in our lives now where we can create implants that have integral, fully dense material substrates and porous surfaces for an implant to carry. So forgive the busy slide. I'll touch on a few of these. There are two of them. There are two slides. What I'd like to leave with you is a feel for the journey that we are on right now. And machines are continuing to change. There are huge quality questions. How can we reproducibly build implants and qualify them? For us, it's a real challenge to optimize our designs, but we need help on the metallurgical side, biocompatibility. It turns out that particle size does matter with these types of implants, and there's a huge regulatory opportunity for all of you to participate in as universities because you're considered to be an objective evaluator. And that's very, very important for us and for the patients we treat. So my last slide, these are truly disruptive times. And I think it is truly it's a wonderful opportunity. On the educational side, we really need to give students the opportunity to learn how to use these systems and to look for ways of improving those systems over time. And it crosses all boundaries with an engineering program and medicine program. I remember the days that we had those collisions, we call it, where medicine was truly talking to engineering, and that's what biomedical engineering really is. And I would challenge all of you as leaders in your universities, you're in a unique position in my mind because you can identify, you're sort of away from it a little bit. And looking in, I think you can identify opportunities. You can help seed the research of young investigators that are trying to do this. And you can help faculty do what I call see it. When faculty sees the challenge, I'm a big believer that they will find the answers that we need. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Karen.
Well, I have a tough act to follow with the two speakers in front of me, but what I'm here today is to hopefully get you as excited about medtech as I think all of us are, but also to give you a sense of what it's like as a CEO of a high-growth medtech company and walk in my shoes a bit to see what I'm looking for in terms of growth of our business and in the talent that we need. And actually, as I was coming to do this presentation, it occurred to me we do a lot of presentations in the academic community, and we make sure that, with academics presenting to their clinicians, we make sure that we always are clear about our alliances with an industry partner because we want to make sure that if there's any perceived bias that it's transparent. And I thought, oh, perhaps I should do the reverse. So here are my disclosures. I'm a Purdue grad. I have my lab still at the Sid Martin Biotech Incubator at the University of Florida, and AxoGen's technology is licensed from both the University of Florida and the University of Texas in Austin, so we have affiliations with a number of you here in the audience. So I thought I would start and just tell you a little bit about medtech. Medtech certainly makes a difference. Innovation helps patients in many ways. There are so many examples. The list is exhaustive, but I thought I would select a number here that I think are truly impactful. And I see motivating for the people that we hire is that they want to come and do something that will make a difference in patients' lives. And when you talk about changing mortality, reducing the incidence of cancer, improving heart outcomes, those are the sorts of outcomes that are empowering to the team that joins the company doing those. But in today's day and age, we also have to think about impact in a different way, and we think about impact in terms of the cost of healthcare. Everything we do in technology has a price tag to it, and so we have to think about what are we doing in terms of the overall cost, and improving outcomes saves money. The most money in healthcare is spent in the last stages of a patient's life. If you can allow that patient to be productive longer and not have a long hospital event, then you are saving money, even though you're adding technology. And you see this in many ways with the reductions in things like minimally invasive surgery. I was involved in this in an early part of my career. Goodness, a lap chole used to be an in-hospital stay. You were knocked out of work for a long period of time. Now it's outpatient. You know, you're back to work quickly, and it's a much lower cost overall incidence of care, and has had billions in impact in terms of the healthcare community. So if you look at our industry overall, well, the United States is still a leader, at least today, in the medtech arena. There actually, I think the perception is that medtech is really run by 2 or 3 big companies, and certainly they're the behemoths of medtech. I used to work for Johnson & Johnson, certainly one of the behemoths of medtech, but there are actually over 7,000 medtech companies in the US, and most have fewer than 100 employees. So it shows you the amount of startups, small businesses that are really focused on trying to do something innovative and impactful and bring that to some scale in terms of impacting healthcare. Annually, if you look at their total combined sales, it's about $150 billion in sales. And this is from AdvaMed, one of the industry groups. So it's some very big numbers. They employ 370,000 employees directly, and both with suppliers and distributors. Many products are sold through independent distributors. There's about 1.9 million total jobs. Payroll itself is substantial and important. It's also a high salary average job in the United States. And all of this, you hear about the high cost of healthcare. If you roll all of the medtech portion together, it is still less than 6% of the total healthcare expenditure. So medtech can save money, and yet is a small component of our overall healthcare expenses. So the opportunity to create these new technologies and new products and help patients is really gated by 2 things. And I will tell you that the pace of medtech new startup companies has decreased over the last 10 years. And it's really been gated by 2 things: competition for capital and competition for talent. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about capital, but if anybody's interested in talking about raising money, that's a big part of the job that I've had over the last 10 years, and offline I'll be happy to tell you more about how companies raise money. But today I want to talk about talent, because that's an equal partner to being able to really fuel the growth that we need in medtech. And to use that as an example, I'm going to take my own company, AxoGen. AxoGen's a high-growth company focused in the area of peripheral nerve. We are a public company now on NASDAQ. About a $340 million market cap, so still in the small cap stage, and still, again, as I said, a high growth company. Oops. So we are in the area of peripheral nerve repair, a new area for products. Traditionally, peripheral nerves have been, if they've been repaired with surgical techniques, not off-the-shelf products, and those surgical techniques had significant morbidities to the patient. Basically, they took a nerve from somewhere else in your body and transplanted it, so you had to agree to give up what it was doing before. We look at that and say, that's ridiculous. Why should you have to give something up to fix something that's injured? Let's go ahead and just fix the injury. And that market opportunity is large. If those procedures that are done today were done with off-the-shelf products, it'd be almost a $2 billion opportunity in the US alone. We've been executing on that and shown greater than 50% growth. We completed last year with about $41 million in revenue. We are commercial stage, commercializing our product line. We've raised the money that we need to have, and in fact, this is why I wanted to spend time talking today about talent. At this point, I have people who would like to give us more money. I'm gated by the talent I can acquire to spend it. Odd situation to be in. So that's why talent is such an important part of what we do. Today we have about 150 employees. Many of those have technical backgrounds. We are a highly technical business. So not everybody who has a technical background has the title engineer. In fact, that's somewhat irrelevant. Our director of surgeon education is a PhD biomedical engineer. Why is that? She gives presentations to surgeons every week, educating them about the science and technology of nerve repair. She needs to understand that herself, but her title isn't engineer. Many of our marketing people have engineering degrees as, again, a very technical field. We want them to understand the science and biology of what they're marketing. So many don't have the title engineer, but many of our associates have a technical background. Again, about 150 employees, and really focused on growth and changing the world in the area of nerve repair. So what are nerves? Well, nerves are they're easy. They're basically the electricity of the body. They carry signals on wires, which are your nerves, out to tell your muscles to move or to give you feedback about the environment, sensory response about the environment. And just like if you cut a wire, you don't get a signal through your nerve if you cut the nerve. Now, they're a lot more challenging than wires to fix because there's biology here, and you cannot just pull them back together and fix them. It has to do with the way they regenerate and the blood supply. So if there's a gap between the nerves, or between the two ends when they're injured, then they can't snug them up to repair them. And that's why they have to go borrow a nerve from somewhere else in the patient's body. The whole goal they have is to just put back the function that patient had before, allow them to have motor function, sensory function, and to have it be normal function. Nerves that heal badly cause pain. One of the significant causes of chronic pain are nerve issues. Either they were cut and they don't carry the full signal or a normal signal, you get aberrant signals coming back to the brain, or there's external forces on the nerve. Actually, any place you have compression on a nerve, carpal tunnel syndrome, people are usually familiar with that. Any place you have compression on a nerve, it alters the signal conduction. And again, that altered signal conduction can be muscle weakness or the perception of pain. So those are the simple, it's very sort of mechanical in nature that affects the way the body functions, that causes the nerves to function either normally or abnormally. We want to restore them back to being normal. We do focus in multiple parts of the body. I mean, if you think about nerves, they're all over the place. And so the opportunity is really enormous. We focus today predominantly on traumatic injuries, but there's also things like every type of surgery where you take a tumor out. Many of the morbidities associated with that procedure are actually nerve injuries. They're not because you had cancer. They're because in accessing the tumor and taking the tumor out, they had to cut out a portion of the nerve. So the erectile dysfunction and incontinence in a prostatectomy is actually a nerve injury. The facial paralysis you have after a facial tumor is because they had to cut the facial nerve in removing the tumor. It's a nerve injury. So there are many places that we can restore function and provide benefits to the patient. Again, we focus on two things today at AxoGen. We focus on repairing them when they're cut, and we focus on repairing them when they're compressed. Again, the idea of carpal tunnel, but it could be any nerve in the body. So our group has developed and now commercializing these 6 products. Predominantly, we focus on our surgical arena where we're repairing the function, but we realize that surgeons need to have a good objective way of measuring outcomes. Just like anything else, if you can't measure it, you don't know whether you have a good outcome or not. And the measurement evaluation tools in the area of nerve repair are antiquated. Actually, if you go to a neurologist, they have a thing that I swear has got like tubes in it that they turn these dials. It's ancient in measuring signal conduction. We really think you've got to start to move that forward so that you can get something that's more responsive, more accurate, and more reproducible. And so we're starting with a series of evaluation tools, really for us to help validate the results that we see from the surgical products. So where's AxoGen going to be in the future? Well, we think we're just scratching the surface in an enormous market opportunity. Expansion in new products, new applications, and global expansion. In 5 years, we expect to have over 600 employees, many of them with technical backgrounds. And that's where I said, as we've done our strategic plan, the acquisition and development of that talent is currently our single biggest barrier to growth. So what are we looking for when we're out hiring? Well, this is partly an advertisement to tell you I'm looking for lots of people, but also to tell you, again, what makes it so hard to find the right people. The first is fit in our culture. We die hard about this. There is nothing that can destroy a high-growth company more than a prima donna who comes in and tears down the team. And so we hire to what we call our axogenic values. And this is actually our highest screening criteria. And we have many people in an interview process, but we actually have people designated to interview for the values. Not just technical skills, but also will this person meet our values. Traits and skills we look for, you're going to see there's a real balance of interpersonal skills and communication skills with technical skills. We look for strong communication skills, ability to work in a team and influence others, good problem-solving skills, tenacity. You know, nothing's ever easy, and the person who gets mad and throws down and walks away isn't the person who's going to solve the problem. Regardless of what the problem is, we need tenacity, to stick-to-itiveness to get to the end. The ability to translate needs into products, the ability to deal with ambiguity and still make decisions. Those are all sort of the soft skills that are essential to be successful in an emerging growth company. And then certainly on the technical side, you heard a lot about biomaterials. I'm completely in agreement with, I think everybody here said, I think the answer is at the interface of the device and the body. That's really where we're all functioning, to try and maximize that, because that is what makes a difference in true outstanding performance, especially in the area of regenerative medicine. Of course, neurotech, bioelectric science, the regulatory processes are becoming more and more and more arduous and more differentiated around the world. We have a product that is regulated as a biologic in the US, a drug in Germany, and in Japan they can't quite figure out where to put it. You know, the completely different regulatory processes for the exact same product. We look at manufacturing, process control, and process validation, Six Sigma and continuous improvement, and we apply that to our business operations as well as our manufacturing operations, and clinical and non-clinical study design and statistics. So all of these are technical areas that we really emphasize in our hiring. I also want to mention diversity. I heard a lot of comments earlier on this, so I won't go through the facts, but I can tell you that from my own experience, we're really here competing to win, and a diverse team is better. Bringing in multiple perspectives gives us a better outcome, and so we are looking to have a diverse slate of candidates. I'm old enough in the world of engineering that I'm used to being the only woman in the room. I'm still the only woman in the room as a CEO presenting at investment conferences and at surgeon meetings. 95% of our customers are male. So I'm hopeful that a future won't look like my past has been. So I'm hopeful that you'll help us in doing that. So I did want to do a shout out to Purdue, because as an engineer, I think I learned some of the most essential things that I apply every day in my job. Here's the two things that I learned at Purdue: organized problem-solving skills and a belief that every problem has a solution. You just have to find it. And I think as an entrepreneur, when you're starting with a blank sheet of paper every day you're creating something. It might be a product, it might be a personnel policy, but every day you're creating things. These are the beliefs that allowed me to create and build a business that I think is sustainable for the long term. So again, shout out to Purdue for giving me those skills. So I just want to again instill the enthusiasm I have for MedTech. Every day we get to have a team of people who get to go and develop products that help people make a real difference in their lives. And I get to develop people to help make those products. And so that sort of circular process gives me a lot of satisfaction and a job that I get to love. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. We have time for a few questions from the audience for our speakers.
Since you mentioned capital and didn't want to talk about it, I'm from WashU in St. Louis, where there's a bunch of entrepreneurial stuff going on. And one of the things that's happened is the pace that deals pay off or potentially get transferred in the essentially high-tech computing universe has really diminished the appetite for investments that take a much longer time. And even though WashU's got this huge med school with all this spectacular, cool stuff, as you say, going on in the lab, you know, they're looking at a minimum 7-8 years, even if it's not pharma, even et cetera. And some of it is regulatory overhead, but some of it is, it just takes a really long time because there's so many steps to go through. And I was wondering what you see as potentially some of our ways out of that. I know we've looked at the idea of being able to elevate computational modeling in ways that you could shorten the time and the amount of data that's required to get the same level of knowledge about something. But it seems that the medtech universe is stuck, that there's just, I mean, there's no shortage of capital out there. It's just a shortage of capital interested in longer term investment.
Yeah, no, that is exactly the crux of the problem, is that as there is more opportunity to make bigger amounts of money in shorter amounts of time in the tech world, money moves there and is being pulled out of medtech, especially in early stage medtech. And so where it used to be that there was a very active angel community, and then the VCs stepped in, and they would step in at a fairly early stage in your development process. That would have been in the 90s sort of model, 2000s sort of model. In today's day and age, the VCs are looking for 1 year from EBITDA positive companies. I mean, that's typically what they're out looking for. And for those of you who aren't familiar with those numbers, that means you're selling products and you're almost profitable. That's what that basically means. They're not interested in early stage med tech. And so you've got to start to look for more creative financing options. There are still angels that are available. I mean, for good or for bad, this is where the tenacity really sticks in. During the recession, I literally went to the Hamptons and met high net worth individuals and suggested they invest in our company. They were intrigued. That's how we bridged during the recession when nobody was doing sort of commercial investment. There are companies that there are expensive financing, but money is money, where you can do royalty deals that say we're going to take a percentage of your revenue in the future to give you a stack of money now. Again, people are coming up with creative financing. None of them are cheap. None of them make founders happy. But if you want to move forward, you got to figure out what's the right way to get the money in. And it's not a small amount of money. I mean, for those of you who don't know the sort of rules of thumb, a med tech, it's $100 million to profitability. Biologics and pharmaceuticals, you're pushing into the billion range in order to get to profitability. So there's some really sizable numbers of amount of money that you have to raise. It is nobody's pocket change that you're going to be able to get to market and profitable. You're going to have to raise money.
Other questions from the audience? I'll ask a question then. How can we be better partners to help you find the talent that you want? How do you go about finding talent, and how can we help you find it?
I think you need to solve that problem internally before you can solve ours. You need way more kids, particularly women and minorities, deciding that science, technology, engineering is cool, and it's exciting, and it's a career. It's not a job, it's a career. And, we can all laugh at the hackneyed, stereotypical jokes. Engineers are these nerdy, squeaky guys. You know what? We wouldn't tolerate jokes like that about race or other things. We'd say that's, but somehow we have a culture that absolutely condones, or at least ignores, the idea that engineers, inventors, scientists are the major reason our economy moves forward. It's the major reason every generation expects to have a better quality of life, cooler toys, and the internet, and longer life. But the engineering community is so busy doing its job, the entertainment community fills the void. They'll tell you that their people are the most exciting people, they're the role models. The sports community will jump in there because without fans, they don't have a business. So I can see why sports and entertainment, Hollywood, the NBA, college sports, put so much attention into grabbing the passion of kids. It's their only reason to exist. But there's no voice of the technical community. I mean, you all get an A+. Look, I'm very proud to be a scientist, an engineer, whatever you want. I don't want to grow up to be a lawyer or a sport. But you get an A+ for your day jobs of educating people and creating all this. But we get a C- for having a voice in our culture. We're not. How many people in the Senate are on the Judiciary Committee that are lawyers? Well, all of them. That makes sense, right? If you're going to be on the Judiciary Committee, you ought to know something about the law, right? How many members of the Science and Technology Committee of the Senate are engineers and physicists? None. Is that shocking? It's terrifying, but we accept that as normal. The engineering schools, I think, need to, from K through 12, attract more. You need to put time and effort into being proud of what you do and showing it to people. And then once you get them to school, the goal shouldn't be to intimidate them and weed them out. It's to encourage them and nurture them and then direct them to people by saying, if you develop these skill sets and these tools, you can solve some of the world's problems. And by the way, make a lot of money doing it.
Sure.
And somehow we don't talk about making a lot of money doing it. You ask kids, who makes a lot of money? Sports people. Really? Yeah, the best sports people make a lot of money. The best tech people, whether it's Bill Gates or Elon Musk or, Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos could buy the NFL, the NBA, put them in his backyard and use them as an amusement. But we don't tell that to people. And frankly, I don't think making money is what drives kids. They want to have a nice career. But if they could buy a sports car, as far as they're concerned, that's enough. They don't need to know billions. They need to believe that a career in tech is an exciting place. Yeah. And I think now is your time because everybody's scared about no jobs. There's not a lack of jobs out there. There's a lack of skills out there. I'm desperately looking for 100 engineers. That's why I came down. I need 100. I need them for my Army program. I need them for my day job. I need them. And you need way more kids excited. You need to raise the bar. You need to make the pool bigger. And I still, as I said, my other piece, if we as a technical community can convince the world that there's a rational approach that isn't win-lose, I take your resources and I win the war, you take. If we can convince the world that kids all over can create their own wealth and we can share that, it's not a zero-sum game. The only thing in the world that's not zero-sum, oil is finite and gold is finite, sadly water's. Ideas are not. You cure cancer, give me your idea. I'll give you an engine that doesn't pollute, I'll give you mine. Now we each have two good ideas. It's not zero-sum. I didn't get something from you. Who's going to tell that to people? The current government leadership isn't. The sports industry won't. The entertainment industry won't. The lawyers won't. Why isn't there a loud voice of the technical community of the world? We're driving everything, but we don't get to decide where we're steering this vehicle. We've been the engine for 1,000 years. We've now got to start driving this driverless system. And along that line, I'll shut up. I really need your universities to help me get these kids to this event, which is, as you know, I saw Norm Augustine as I was leaving. He's joined the board, and he's going to help. But I decided, since I saw Vince on your panel this morning at Yale, and he's been a 25-year fantastic supporter, he wrote a book. He wrote a book called Robots Behind the Design, and it's 30 vignettes of 30 teams over the years. He's been a fantastic supporter. I said, Vince, I'm not sure that these deans are easy, but they can be had, right? What if I tell them all, I'll send them all a copy of your book. If they'll send me an email that tells me what country they have some association with, any institution that might help get kids on track to become part of our solution in a cooperative as opposed to a self-destructive way. So please, if there's a way you can help us make this work as professionals, as parents, as citizens, it's fun. Get involved. I'll send you a book.
On that, let's thank our panelists.